Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carroll Connection. I'm your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. Did want to take a chance to shout out last week's episode 191 with Levi Leland, and he is basically a tour guide of Poe's Providence, walking through Providence, going through Edgar Allan Poe's stopping points while he was here in Providence and all that stuff. And he was recently added to a large book about his piece in Providence, and it was a really great episode. We talked a lot about his relationship with his father and how he got into Edgar Allan Poe scholarship. And it was a really great episode. And it's one of those episodes that I think everyone should go listen to. It's one of those that just like really sparked a love for the podcast again. I always have those episodes throughout the year where it's just one of those ones that reminds me of why I love doing this so much. Please check his episode out. It's at thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you'd like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search The Carroll Connection, or at Jared M. Carroll, and it should pop up for you. And again, if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, please hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll, at The Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. I'm always looking for new guests, always looking for return guests. Hence, we're here for another episode. But I just like always to put that out there for anyone that feels like they want to come back on and talk about stuff, even if you feel like you don't have anything to promote necessarily, just to come back on and talk with me. I'm always looking for that type of stuff. So that'll bring me to today's episode 192, bringing back someone who's been on twice prior. This is the third appearance. Last time appeared on was episode 118 back in October of 2022. Zane, Propatier.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. Glad to have you back on the podcast. And again, thank you for being willing to do this a little bit short notice. I had rescheduling, and we had talked about doing a third episode.
Yes.
Kind of over like the span of like last several months. I know we were going back in DM talking about things. I know you had some stuff in your personal life you were figuring out in terms of your career and finishing up school, and now here we are with the podcast, ready to dive into some stuff. And we had a great pre-interview. We were going on different things. We probably could have talked for another hour before we even got to the podcast, and we were like, we gotta start recording. So here we are. But so to kind of catch everybody up on, because obviously for anyone that's listening for the first time, if you haven't heard guests when they come on like a second or third time, I like to catch them up or catch the audience up of kind of what happened. Mm-hmm. So to recap, last episode was we titled it Wake Up, and hence of the album 1030 that you dropped, which we referenced your grandfather that left you a voicemail.
Yeah.
And that was why we titled it Wake Up, and because he was telling you to wake up in the voicemail. So we kind of found that a little bit fitting. So I titled it that. And we kind of dove into kind of the creation. You were promoting it. And now we are looking from 2024 back at 2022. And I kind of want you to kind of recap some of the stuff that happened with the album release. And kind of, I know you had a huge party about that and you were donating a lot of funds. So I kind of want you to dive into some of the stuff that happened.
Absolutely. So to start off, I think I'll start off by saying the words, or the phrase I should say, like, it gets better. I think sometimes people think that the tragedies in their life define them, but they don't. I'll go back a little bit further from our first podcast. I re-listened to it just to kind of remind myself of like how much an idiot I was. And like kind of be like, what was I saying? Like, was I like talking crazy? And not as much as I thought. Like I said a couple stupid things, but going back, I was like, wow, like I was coming from not only the pandemic, which of course, like for everyone was so impactful, but 3 major losses. Like that was the theme of that episode, was like figuring out what to do with loss. And like that whole episode is about like trying different things, new things. I was like, if you want to do art. Like if you want to do music. Like that was the whole purpose of like me coming on. And that's exactly how I coped with those 3 losses. Fast forward, it was kind of cool because I was like, I'm a psych major in college. I don't really know what I want to do. And we're like, all right, cool. We wrapped up. And I know I definitely slid in your DM. I was like, all right, the album like that I like kind of referenced, like talked about in the first episode, it's happening. Now this gets to our second episode. And that whole episode was about like waking up, right? A whole like kind of like motivational turn. Like everyone in their life has um tragedy, happiness, sadness, like more or less most people feel all emotions at different times in their lives. Like that's not like divisive to say. But for me it was like how can I spark that motivation in people? That little thing deep inside them. How can I just like spark that and be like, okay, like wake up, like here's your chance. Like if you've ever had a chance, like it's now. Wake up, do something with your life. I think I said like pull up your bootstraps. Like it's definitely an older term, but like I think I like to say it. I don't know why. I'm like pull up your pants, you know? It's like just do something. It doesn't have to be something major, but just do something. That was like the whole theme. And not only telling people to do something, but also be like, look what I've done. I talked a lot about like art. I talked about how being an artist is like inherently selfish. We talked a lot about that definitely on and off podcasts. And with that, I was like, well, my way to reason putting out music, a 5 or 6 track, like small album was like, I'm putting this out and donating all proceeds. So a lot of times, like, people are like, well, they're kind of benefiting, but absolutely not. Like, I didn't even pay myself back. Like, I want to make that clear because I think some people get confused sometimes. But whatever I put in is what I put in. But everything that was received went directly to St. Jude in this case. What's crazy is during that period of time I did like I told you how like I Twitch streamed, I played like video games. That was like the first step. I called that like, silly like ZZ season 1. And then like from there I started getting back into my music. That was like ZZ season 2, and then the release and like the final party, which I'll get into, was like ZZ season 3. And those silly little stupid seasons that I did, like, ended up being something so huge, like from shirt sales, gaming donations, the album, and the release party. Like we were able to donate over $5,000 to St. Jude, which is amazing. Like our little community of people were able to do like it doesn't seem big, but such a big impact for like families out there that are dealing and working with children who have cancer. So really impactful. Definitely provided meaning in my life at that point, and that release party was so special to me. It was like you kind of mentioned it before we started, but like it was for me like an end of an era. And I think like as passionate as I am about making music, that was like what I needed to cap off this journey and start new. So we had the party. It was super cool. It was at the Fet in Providence. I think like 60 people showed up because it was $10 a ticket and we made about like $600. And then we also had a donation box that we made like another like $400 or $500 shirts. So like it's cool because like once in a while I'll see the shirt circle around like the neighborhood. Um hopefully not the savers, but like no, like everyone, still wears it from time to time. The record like still makes like money, like because it's just like passive, it's not massive, but like maybe like every couple months like 10, 20, 30, $40, like I can just like keep putting in that, which like grows this number, which is really cool. The music's still up on Apple Music, Spotify, and all major streaming platforms. And I was able to like kind of help out 2 other artists. I talked about them like very briefly, but like Jay Brizo was a opener, and he was like someone that didn't do music for so long, and that was his first like opportunity to perform in front of people. And like that opportunity like really boosted him back up, and now he's like rapping every day. So it's like even though it wasn't necessarily meant directly for him, like how much of an impact it was for him to kind of, in his sense, wake up and say, I really like this. And I almost let it slip, and I'm going to continue to do so. The other person was Monty, and he posts on TikTok every single day. Like, I talk to him time to time. I went to college with him. He is such a talented young individual. Like, he every day he grinds, and he was already woke, right? Like, he was like, I already got to do this. And what I respect about him is he just keeps going. And he went from like 200 followers to 2,000 followers. And I think he actually like might be starting to hit 5, 6, 7. But like, I know one day he'll be at 20, 30,000 because he just grinds. Um, and, I finally hit the stage, and it was so surreal to see like people start moving forward. Like, and I was like, whoa, like this is a real concert where like the headliner comes out. I was like, I'm not special. I like came out, and it's like cheering, and like my friends, my family, like people I don't know. That's the cool thing, right? Like people I don't know are just like pulling up. And I started off with like a couple of my like bigger songs that people recognize and start having fun. I do a pretty good job with like crowd interactions. So like I'm kind of like making fun of them, like having fun. Like I called my fiance up and like had her dance. Like she's an introvert, so I definitely like gave her like trauma for the rest of her life. But, it was like so sweet. And then it came a point where I was about to sing, or I was starting a song called Don't Go. And Don't Go is like this culmination of the trauma and pain I had from the losses from the first episode that I talked about. And it's like pleading to the world, like it's not fair. And I know it's not fair. And I'm selfish for not wanting you to go, but like, don't go, right? Everyone has loss. And I think all of us selfishly feel like they're gone too soon, even if they're gone late. And I was like singing it. And eventually I just like stopped. And I was like, I have all these people smiling, like all these people like swaying and the flashlights. And I was like, I just like burst into tears. And I literally just like took a knee, and I like felt like Tim Tebow. I was like just sitting there, and I was like bawling I like bawling. I'm not talking about just like a tear, like single tear. I was like bawling my eyes out, and it was like everything I worked for led up to this moment. And it was so special, so meaningful. And couple people actually like came up to me and like gave me a hug. I finished the song. We finished the night with like a fun song because I didn't want everyone to like feel depressed. And then like we ended up just like having a good time. Like everyone was like drinking. We had like a bar. We had like food. We had like people like the shirts sold out, which was like amazing. Um, the shirts sold out to the point I didn't even have one for myself. I was like, I should have thought about this. Like, and I was like, well, it is what it is. I'll just order more. And it was just like such a surreal moment. And once that ended, it kind of leaves you with like, what's next? And I was like, okay, well, now I finished the other goal. And since the last time we met, I was like, I'm gonna go for my master's to become a counselor. And I was like in over my head when I said that, but I believe in manifesting things. I told you that when I had no idea if I could do that. That's crazy. Like if you think about that, right? Like I said I was going to do something, and I had no idea that I was going to do that. My first year of my master's program, I wanted to drop out. I was like, I don't need to do this. I have a good job. I'm respected at my job. I get paid like relatively well there. And I'm going to like take a risk? Why? Like, I'm so comfortable. Like, why am I gonna take a risk? I was like, "That's nuts." Um, my first year was tough. I was in a classroom with around 23, 24 girls. Listen, I love girls, but being the only guy, like, it's tough. We think differently. And this isn't like a pity party. Like, don't feel bad for me. It's not like it was torture. But like being the only boy, it's like, damn, like we just think differently. We talk differently. And for me to be in that classroom environment, it was tough because I'm like, I'm just not, I don't know if I'm meant to do this. Like, you just look around and you're like, who doesn't fit in? So, of course, I took my own advice and I was like, pull up your bootstraps. You signed up, you're going to complete it. I complete it. I end up becoming a child therapist. So I work in Warwick as a child therapist, and it was easily one of the best decisions I made in my life.
Yeah, it sounds like obviously we have a culmination of all these different things that had happened in this period since we last had the podcast, and we'll dive in a little bit of like the party first before I respond to that stuff.
Sure.
But I think having that goal and setting that goal out originally to create the album, to drop the album, to have the party, to raise the money, and we were talking off air about that, and just like having kind of that moment where you're like, I made it, like I did it.
Right.
And I think everyone kind of strives for that moment in their life to when you're looking at like your art and like having it appreciated by people, and you put in all this time. We were talking off air about all the different softwares that we use and
Right.
talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
how much
yeah.
time, and like I was thinking as you were talking about that. Sorry, my voice, I don't know why it's like
It's all
I said
good.
something in my throat.
It's all good. I'm
Um
sniffly, so it's
but
cool.
I was thinking like you're doing all this work for a 3-4 minute song. And it's so crazy because, like, obviously, I'm coming from a place where I have pretty long format content. I mean, maybe
Right.
short form in terms of like podcasts nowadays on the internet, but like you're really shooting for like the perfect 3 to 4 minutes, maybe 2 minutes of like song that you could create,
Right.
and you're putting months into this, and not everyone sees that when you're like the artist, whether
Right.
you're a creative or an artist or whatever you do. People don't see the work that you do, and they don't see the behind the scenes, and they don't necessarily always appreciate the art, even if it's like maybe it's not the greatest or not the best that you could put out as a person, but you put in so much effort to create that one thing.
Hmm.
Like, not everyone is going to appreciate it, and then you also have to be okay with that. And it's hard as a creative to not feel appreciated for something you put so much time and effort into.
Right.
And I mean, I feel that all the time with this podcast. So we were talking off air how long I've been doing this. I've been doing this for almost 5 years.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, sure. I wish I could average like 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 views on a podcast. I sure
Right.
everyone wishes that for their art to be super successful, but it's about the value that it gives you.
Hmm.
What do you feel like after doing a podcast, after writing a song? Like, that's what matters. Like, and it's digested by the people that support you. Did they care about it? Did they like it? Is it
Hmm.
good to them? And I think once you get that kind of feedback, it's good. And then if it goes further beyond that, awesome. And then in a moment like that, when you're on stage and you're performing a song that
Yeah.
means so much to you, to see people supporting you on a stage, like just the visualization of that is so powerful, and I can understand why you would start crying from something like that. Like,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
Like,
Beyond words.
yeah, it's like I don't even know how, like, because I want to ask you like kind of like what is like going through your head, like what do you feel like looking back on it from now, because like that, like it's so I can imagine it's hard to describe something like that because it's such a powerful moment.
It definitely is. I think like that's one of those moments that if we think back in a lifetime, like a flashlight memory, right? And there's different ways to say it. You could say flashlight, you could say light bulb, but the whole idea of that is like when we think of our lives and we say like describe a happy time, like something pops in your head, or describe a moment you're proud, something pops in your head, describe your favorite pizza topping, something pops, right? And it's like at that moment that was like one of those highlight moments in my life. Like that is something I will cherish for the rest of my life, having all my loved ones there. It made me think of a couple things, like, you know, not to get too morbid on the podcast, but like death, right? And funerals and all these people that support you, support your loved ones, and care for you go to pay respect, right? They go to say their final goodbyes. And in a way, I felt like that album party was like, this is my like this is my funeral. Like I was like, but I'm alive. Like everyone says, like at one point or another, they get pissy and they're like, I wish I died so I can see how you and it's like, well, I flipped that to the positive, right? And I was like, I wish I was alive and could see all the people that care about me and love me and cherish me. And I was like, they're right here and I'm here. And it's like, imagine like living like your funeral, but like everyone's there. Like, and we're alive and we're like celebrating. I was like, this is insane. Like, this is my flowers moment. Like, give me my flowers. And this is it. And what I benefited mentally from that is so much more like impactful than the money I would have received. Because let's just say after the music and everything like that, I never donated and it just went 5 grand in my pocket. I know 5 grand is a lot of money to some people, but like 5 grand would have came and went. It would have been spent on food. It would have been spent on friends. It would have been spent on my fiance, who deserves it. It would have been spent on a lot of people and a lot of things that are stupid and games but to even have that other half, like the insight now, it's like wow, like hindsight's 2020, and even for me to think about that at the time, like hey, like yeah, like you're a broke college kid. Like 5 grand is like $1 million right now. But even for me then to be like, put that towards something more meaningful is more impactful because I made a difference in others and myself. Like that was nuts.
Yeah, and that's like I think the ultimate goal is like you took what you created, used it as an opportunity to donate to something that was meaningful to you. Obviously, we talked in prior episodes of why St. Jude's meant so much to you and why donating to them was like super valuable. And I encourage everyone to go listen to those episodes. Um,
Thank you.
to get a full picture of how we got to here today too. It always like
Right.
it's valuable, I think, and that's the cool thing about doing the podcast is like you get to look back on stuff like that. I mean, I don't always do it as much lately, but I was listening to clips from like my grandfather's episode
Yeah.
and just like it's like so weird where it's like you hear the voice and it's so crisp and it's like he's here, like he's still here, like
Right.
I feel like I just saw him, like I could picture him, I know what he looks like when he was saying the stuff, like it's happening,
Yep.
but it's like he's not, we're years removed from this. And I recently had my grandmother come on the podcast
Oh,
and
that's
we
nice.
got to talk about it, and she's had time to grieve the loss of my grandfather, so it was super powerful. We recorded it in her house, and we had his cut it because he used to go to the Providence Friars a lot. So during COVID, they had cutouts in the seats for everybody. So
Yep.
she had his cutout behind her as
That's
she was doing the podcast, and it's just one of those where it's like, wow, like to go from episode 2 and her episode was 189. Like how much of life has happened since something like that? And even when we talk about our episodes, how much time has happened since you've been on? Like
right.
you go back to 2021 when you first came on, like you don't know what we're doing. I'm still very early in my podcast process at that point. Like I don't even think I wasn't even recording. Like
Right.
your second episode, I only have one camera angle.
Yeah.
Now you come here, we have the 3 different angles. You get like the new shirt, like it's the environment, like things change. And I think it's important to acknowledge that as you're going through your creative process, like chapters close, things
Yeah.
end, and it's okay that they end. And to reference the living, like living your funeral, honestly, like that is honestly a beautiful concept, to be honest, because not a
Right.
lot of people get the opportunity to get the praise that they rightfully deserve. And I think living in that moment, like everyone kind of wishes for something like that, to be on stage, to be celebrated for something that you do, and you're doing it for a good cause, so it's not even like a selfish endeavor.
Right. Right.
So it's for something good. And when I think about kind of like, because I have these thoughts too, and I think I've talked about death and suicide and like
Mhm.
things like that nature on the podcast before, but in terms of just like we all have thoughts about death
Yeah.
and like what it could be like at your funeral, who's going to show up. And the thoughts that I have is like, it's like, what are you going to be remembered for? Legacy. Like, I'm very big on legacy. I'm
I am
I'm
too.
big Game of Thrones guy. So like, I mean, my whole leg sleeve is Game of Thrones. But um, I think about like the future. Like, what am I going to be remembered for? What can I pass down if I have children, or if my nieces and nephews, if I don't have children? Like, what are they going to remember me for? What are my friends and family going to remember me for?
Right.
And it's hopes of doing something positive. That's what this whole thing was about. Was something positive. And we were talking off air about it, and you were talking about the concept, just like there's something in you that wants to do more than the bare minimum. And I
Right.
could say the same thing about you, with the sense that you created all those things, and there's something more. And I think that was just a beautiful concept, that about living the funeral almost. Like, it's just one of those things that's kind of rare, you know?
Right. Absolutely. And the thing about making art is it usually pays back in some way or another. So I'll talk about a couple like key instances in my life, but I can even share how your art has touched my life and touched others.
I mean, shout out to, just not to jump on it, but like, I'll let you finish your thoughts. But the picture my aunt sent, and like, you always say how much you wear my merch and stuff like that, and then to coincidence, my aunt uncle are out and they see you wearing the shirt and call you over and send me a picture, like crazy stuff like that.
Right. So for anyone not watching, like we'll kind of explore that a little bit right here. So um Jared's been awesome. He gives shirts for free for basically ever. And I've at this point been around the podcast long enough that I've had like this is the third generation. Like shout out. I'm gonna like pull this. I'm like sitting on it, but like really like shout out the shirt because like this is quite literally like so awesome that I've had um at this point so many of them in my closet and I wear them like on a weekly basis. So I was I wear it and I'm sure like when I made shirts like people would be like, "Yeah, yeah, I wear it. I like it." Probably goes in their closet, goes in a drawer, goes to savers, goes out the door, right? Like eventually like that shirt cycles out. I wear your shirt, I wear it to the gym, I wear it to work. Being a therapist, like I want to dress pretty casual. Like I don't want to look too fancy. Like I work with kids, I want to connect with them. So dress is important. Originally, I thought like, oh, I have to dress in a button up, and then the kids are like, "Who the hell is this guy?" Like they were like, "I can't like look like this." Like so, I started dressing more down. And your shirt was like perfect because it's professional, but also like has the mental health piece. Especially the second gen says, mental health like matters, and that's of course right. Um, so for me, that was like giant. I was like, I'm gonna wear this around, and I told you a little bit, but you wouldn't believe how many people stopped me. Like, Jim, someone was like, "Hey," I'm like, "Hello," like, "Hello," and they're like, "Mental health matters." That's all they said, and I was like, "Yeah, it does matter." And then I was like, "Does my shirt say something?" And I was like, "Oh," I was like, they didn't just like X-ray me and say like, "Oh, he's a therapist." Like, I was like, "How do they know?" Like, so it was weird. Couple days later, I'm on the treadmill, and this guy kind of looks over and he's like, "Can I ask you something?" And I was like, "Yeah, what's up?" He's like, "What does your shirt mean?" And I was like, it's the Carroll Connection. It's a podcast I've been on." He's like, "I like podcasts. You mind sharing it with me?" I said, "Yeah." Sorry, I'm like really sniffly.
No, you're good.
It's
You're
it's it's allergy season. So I was like, "Yeah, like I absolutely don't mind." Like I told him about it. He popped it on and he starts listening to it and he was like, "I like this." And I was like, "I'm glad." And I see him at the gym occasionally. We wave and he'll like point at me and he's like, "Carroll Connection?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Carroll Connection." And the more recent time, what you were referencing is my fiance and I like get together. I'm wearing the shirt. We're going to like, it's a bar. Like you're not supposed to dress like super fancy, but don't also like dress with like holes in your shirt. So I'm pretty casual. And I walk in, and this like at the time older gentleman kind of just goes, I was like, oh, I was like, what'd I do? I was like, am I in trouble? What's going on? But I'm in Warwick, so I'm like, oh, I must be like this is a work thing. Like it's probably some kid's uncle that I see or something like that. And he goes, Carroll Connection. And I was like, yeah, Carroll Connection. He's like, that's my nephew. And I was like, really? And your aunt comes over. She's like, oh my God, this is Jared's shirt. And she was like, can I please take a photo? I was like, absolutely. We took a photo. Maybe some way, somehow you can like put that like on here or like
Yeah.
put it on an Instagram at least, but like super cool. Like how this seemingly like it's not my art, it's not my podcast, but the connections I have been able to share with people that don't know you and also people that are related to you, and how much positivity is brought from like I have never had someone look at the shirt and say, ugh, like it's only positivity. Like that's huge. That's ginormous. So getting back to like what I've done, you know, when I released that song Don't Go, the one that like I told you I'm like bawling my eyes out. That song, like my aunt who lost her daughter, my cousin Miranda, she listened to that song and she was like, when I was at your concert and I heard you perform it live and I felt your emotion, I remember her saying this and she was like, it filled like a small void in me that has not been filled in a long time. It's like, wow. Like that, you know, everyone says like, I just want to impact someone. There's that one person. And that's on a serious note. On a not so serious note, I have my song Skin, which I made the music video for. It's like crazy. I could if we have time, I can tell you about like the music video process because it was like a beautiful nightmare, as I guess what I would call it. But I have a pilot buddy. We call him Spanky. I won't tell you why, but we call him Spanky. And we he, you know, he's a pilot, so he's like pretty well off. He has a boat. He lives in Florida, and he's like, this is on my like return home playlist. And he mentions it all the time to me. So it's not like, and this is years later now. This is like 2 years. He's like, I love that song. Like I do. He's like, I listen. He's like, I cannot return home on my boat without listening to that. So it's like, even on just like the positive, like doesn't really matter stage, like in his life, like that's a daily rotation when he's on that boat. For my aunt, that helped her fill that void. And for me, like it's helped me fill so many voids of like difficulty, problems, help me manage them, talk about them, being more open about them. So it just really shows you like if you and this is another wake up moment is like if you have that passion and that thing inside that's like I'm not like me doing the minimum just isn't working anymore, like go out, do more than the minimum. Like please, like you would be surprised who it can touch. You would be surprised who it can impact, who goes to bed and is like feeling better because of that hour you have done a podcast for them, or that 4 minutes that you made a song that you made someone smile that maybe hasn't smiled all week. And that memory, like that is so impactful for me at the concert, is not just for me. Like I remember one of my best friends, like Ryan Reardon, shout out, he like helped me record the whole album. And you know, I'm like an optimist in a lot of ways. So for my music, I'm like, I'm the best, I'm gonna do it. Like, but I'm a realist. I'm like, realistically, it's not gonna go anywhere, but I'm happy I do it. And I had some of those like pessimist vibes in my head. I'm like, this is gonna be a nightmare. People are gonna get drunk. This is gonna go wrong. The sound qualities, all these bad thoughts. And Ryan's just like bearing with me with all my like craziness, and he's probably like thinking like, oh, like just shut up. It's gonna be fine. But at the end, he was like shocked. He's like, oh my God, like you killed it. Like you actually killed it. And like even the people like him that believed in me, like I surprised them. Like even the people that were for me, they were surprised at like how well something like he was like shocked. He was like, "Oh my god, like you killed it." And I just remember like kind of like laughing and like doing one of those like bro hugs and we were just like laughing like we laughed that whole car ride back. And it was just like such a surreal moment. So I think like getting back to like not to get too off topic, but just that idea of like put your art out there. You never know who it's going to touch. I don't care if you get 10,000 views. You know, you talked about like well, you know, in a perfect world, like I want my podcast to get 2,000 views, 10,000 views. But here's the question, right? Say every podcast you do gets 1 million views, but 0 people resonate with it, which it wouldn't happen because your podcast is unbelievable. And I mean that. But if 0 people resonate with it, this is a hypothetical. Or would you rather have that podcast where 10 people listen a week? Absolutely. And all 10 people take what they hear in the podcast and they're like, do something with that. Like it hits them in the spot. They get out, they listen to this, they start making art, they listen to last week, they start doing something more meaningful. They listen to your like story from, you know, episode to episode, your personal episodes that you're kind of just talking like because you're not talking to yourself. You're talking like to your audience or people listening and like really resonating with them to be like, "Hey, like I'm just a regular guy. Like I have a job. I like I have responsibilities. Like I'm not just loaded where like my bills are forgotten about and you're still able to do something so special. So why can't you?"
Yeah, and I really resonate that, and I appreciate that sentiment as well. It's like because I definitely feel like I'd rather have the 10. Like, and I've always kind of leaned that way. In the beginning, probably not. In the beginning, I'm
Right?
like, yeah, I'll take a million, like no
Yeah.
doubt. But
Give me a
then
mill.
then you see people that get famous quickly and like how easily you can be forgotten. How quickly you'll be forgotten. Like, sure, you can make a quick buck off a couple million views and you could maybe sustain that for a month, 2 months, 3 months, maybe a year.
Right.
But I've always kind of started to lean into the concept of like sustained success, like
Mhm.
constantly going at it, long-term goals, like and I've always said a lot of the value that will be coming from this podcast isn't right now. Like I'm obviously we're getting the value now. We're in the
Of course.
conversation.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
it's the future stuff. Like when you look back on this and you get to appreciate the moment, like when I look back on episode 2 with my grandfather, I'm forever grateful that I recorded that episode.
Yeah. That's going to
I
be surreal.
I always reference it because how much it means to
Yeah.
the podcast. It almost cements the legacy of the podcast because I did something like that.
Right.
And it almost like it's like injects like obviously like it's the Carroll connection. The name is there for my like obviously grandfather. It's the senior. So it's
Right.
like he's in this, but like he's like literally a part of this in helping this continue to move forward. And then
Right.
so to do an episode like my grandmother, it's like it's almost full circle. It's like
Right.
I've done so much with this and like obviously my future, I would love to get my parents on this is something I'm trying to work on, but it's when they're ready, when they
Right.
want to.
Of course.
But to be able to sit down from them, even with my grandmother, like that's my grandma, but I was the interviewer in that episode. I'm
Right.
her grandson, but I'm also interviewing her.
Yeah. That's
So
wild.
and I referenced that episode because if you listen to episode 2 and then one episode 189, you could see my actual growth
Mhm.
where I'm not so much just jumping to talk and I'm not jumping in episode 2 I didn't even have the podcast yet. It was pre-recorded and I didn't even release anything yet.
Right.
So to go to episode 189 is you're really getting to see my actual growth and I think it's cool that you actually like return the favor to me in the sense that you appreciate and you say it to me. Like you tell me that you wear the shirt and like to get the photo from my aunt. My aunt's also been on this podcast. So it's like
That's awesome.
to get that photo, I think it was out at the movies. And to get that it's so impactful because like you don't get that when you do your art. And you could
Yeah.
probably relate to that. A lot of people don't tell you they enjoy the stuff. Like every
They
once in
won't.
a while you get someone that really will message you like, hey, I really appreciate that, or my family really appreciates the episode. And it's usually directly kind of right after you drop something.
Right.
But like years later, months later, like you don't know what that impact had on that person. You don't know what conversations could have been sparked in their own relationships because they came on a podcast with you. Like I don't know any of that most of the time. So it's kind of just blind faith that I know I'm doing something good. And,
Right.
and I think that's like a positive thing when you're creating art is to have almost this like blind faith that things are going to work out for the best. And I just try to believe that. Like I'm not like a super religious God person. I try to say spiritual, if anything,
Yeah.
even though that
Right.
term's kind of taken its own fucking meaning in this world.
That's for
But
sure.
I try to just have faith that I know that I'm doing something that's worthwhile. That when I close my eyes for the final time, that people that are still here and that knew me can appreciate what I did. Like whether it's the biggest podcast in the world or something that's like really local and people really resonated with. Like I just want to hopefully be remembered for someone that did something good. And I
Yeah.
think that's like the positive of doing it.
Right. And I think like something about that is this like this podcast or my music or other work that the other people that have guests on your podcast have is like it's grounded, right? Like we're not these Hollywood stars. We're not like did you watch this so random, but did you watch like the Kill Tony special a couple weeks
I love
back in
Kill
New
Tony.
York?
Yeah, yeah.
So he was like in New York and he had like it was live, which was a big deal. It was at Madison Square Garden. And it has like his regulars. Like there was Joe Rogan and like I like Rogan, but you see him wear this like it was a fur coat and it was like yellow and it was the ugliest thing and he wore these glasses. At first, I was so confused. I didn't even recognize him. I was like, Howie Mandel's on here? Like, I was like, I couldn't recognize him. And it's like, it's Hollywood. Like, that's not real. Like, he might be more real and grounded on his podcast, which like I would agree with, like that statement. Like, I think he's more grounded on his podcast, but the fact of the matter is like that event, like he's putting on a show too. Like he's putting on these like glasses that are he's indoors. You're wearing glasses. You're wearing a fur coat. It's probably like hot as hell in there. Like there's 10,000 people or more. It's like it's it's fake. It's fake. It's for views. It's for people to comment. Like even me commenting is like he won. Someone mentioned the coat. Someone mentioned how ridiculous it is. That's how publicity works. Like think about Kanye West. He's a master at it. He's like, I don't care if you say bad things about me or good things about me, but people are going to speak about me no matter what. And it's like, that's how Hollywood stays relevant. But when you're a real person, it's like, you don't need to stay relevant. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, the only people I need to be relevant to are my like 40 people that I see on any given week. I'll get a little therapeutic here. I'll talk a little bit about like a little philosophical, a little therapeutic. In everyone's life, I don't know if there's any theory that backs this up, so kind of just pulling this from like my own thoughts, but in everyone's life, there's like 50 to like 60 people that you see on any given week. I'm not talking about that friend from high school you like were tight with for a couple years and you haven't seen. I'm talking about people that you see on any given week. So like for me, I see my grandparents, I see my fiance, I see my best friend, I see and then people you talk to also like telephone. So like I talk to like my mom once a week, like but we only really have like a community of like 40 to 50 people that we really see. And it's like sometimes you have to even like appreciate your villains. Like it's a big concept, so it's going to take some time to like flesh out, but even the people like at job or like that like your family member that maybe like sometimes you get that one that just doesn't get it or like ask a question that annoys you or it's like those people craft your world. Now we have social media. We talked about this in one of the podcasts about like how we like can worry on every single level of the universe from a meteorite hitting you or like yourself having mental difficulties. Like there is worry from the ground to the sky. But the idea here is even those people that annoy you, or maybe you don't appreciate talking to as much on a daily basis, are a part of that community. And like, how special is that, that like they craft your world? Like these people that are friends with you, that annoy you, that are cool with you, that, you know, they make your world like what you recognize as life. Like, I almost appreciate the person I roll my eyes at every day because I'm like, like, if I didn't have you, I'd have to roll my eyes at someone that's a lot worse. The people that make me smile, I'm so grateful because I'm like, I get to smile at someone so beautiful and caring. And you start to appreciate like life differently and view it differently. And it's the idea of like everyone matters. Even the people that you're like, ugh, they matter. The people you love matters. And the people that you don't really connect or resonate with matter. Those 50 to 60 people, like it probably is less, honestly. Like it's probably like you probably see like 40 in any given week. And then sometimes you see that friend from 5 years ago, but those are very essential figures in your life. And you start to appreciate like them. Even if they don't appreciate you, you're like, hey, you're the person I roll my eyes at.
Yeah, it goes into this concept of gratitude and appreciation of life, and even builds off the shirt that I kind of gave you. The back of it's your life matters,
Right.
and it's to be read from the person reading your shirt. It's like, oh, my life does matter, whether you like them or not. Their life matters too.
Mhm.
Obviously, you can get into the extremes where people are
Right.
like criminals and things like that, and we don't need to get into that
There's an extreme
debate.
with everything, right?
But it's the concept that like even the people that you might not agree with every single thing, their life matters too. And even if you don't necessarily like them as a person, there might have been something that happened in their life to cause them to believe something that they believe, and that's why they are the way they are. And
Right.
it's seeing people for people. Like we all have shit. There might be something that you went through that makes you a little bit more colder than you would like to be. And it's to have a little bit more sympathy and empathy for the people around you. And
That's the two big words.
this is where the conversation of the podcast comes into, is where it's just asking the questions of why people do the things that they do. And once you get past that question, you can start to hear their story. And you basically, all I do is give people the paintbrush, give them the canvas, show them the boundaries, and say, hey, paint your picture.
Right.
And they paint their story, and then you get to see what their story is from their point of view with a little bit of opinions or questions from me. But it's no different than maybe a teacher. Like really, it's like I'm just here to help guide you to tell your story in a
Right.
place where we have an hour and it's on
Yeah.
camera and stuff like
Right.
that. But it's
But
just
this is a
it's to
safe
help.
place. And I think that's what I respect about it is, I think what's so awesome about this is you respect where we come from. So, when I come on this podcast, I'm a lot of things. And I tell you, and you take my word for it. Like, it is true. Like, I am a musician, I've made music, but it's also true that I'm a therapist. It's also true I'm a son. It's also true that I'm, uh, like a fiance and more and more things. It's like I am all these things. And what I choose to share with you is like more the art because I want to inspire. But it's like why I went into the job I go into is like, I work with kids and a lot of them are disadvantaged for a number of reasons. But the truth is like most of them aren't disadvantaged mentally because they were born that way, which is like a really big misconception. Of course, there are some people that have um, born deficiencies that like impact them, but the truth is like a lot of it is environment, and it's like we talked about like these support systems, right? That 10:30 party, like and maybe that's the theme of today is like live your funeral, right? Like live as if like these people, because going back, like even the person you roll your eyes at is going to be at your funeral, right? Like all these people make your community, our support. And when you have that support, it's like, wow, like that's all that's missing. That's the missing key. It's like that environment, that one person to believe in you. That is like unreal. And at different points in my life, it was different people. Growing up, it was my grandfather. We talked a lot about him, right? He was the one that believed in me. He didn't say, like, you're going to fail because you grew up differently. He was like, I'm going to take you under my wing and we're going to work through this. You know, when I started making music, there was a lot of people that shit on it, and Ryan, as I mentioned, was that one guy that was like, I'm not in love with all of it, but I believe in you that you can get to a point where we will love all of it. When I was going through a tough time during like that 2016, 2017, like pre-COVID, I'm a teenager, like having a tough time. It's like Olivia, who's my fiance, she was the one person that was like who I needed at that point. And who are we if we're not defined by others? Like, we are our people around us. From they bring out the best in us, they bring out the worst in us. And then there's like ourselves, and what will ourself do with that? So when I say that, I mean, like, are we going to ask for more? Are we going to be content? Are we going to let that outlet come out, or are we going to shelter it? If anyone is listening, like, wake up, take that, like, do something. If you asked me 6 years ago if I would have been a therapist, I would have been like, yeah, right. I'm a screw up. I got problems. Why would I be a therapist? But I helped myself first. Something in me wanted more. If you asked me, would you ever have music on Apple Music or Spotify? 16-year-old me writing in notebooks would have been like, no. Like, I'm not Eminem. I'm not Drake. I'm not Kendrick. I'm none of them. Like, why would I? So the question is, or not really the question as much, but like, you got to be a dreamer, and you have to see it through the way that makes you comfortable. So with me, my goal for music was to do exactly what I did with it. I win. With my career, I wanted to help others. Didn't matter how or what. I win. With my peers, the people I love, the people I roll my eyes at, I wanted both sides of the spectrum and to love and care and appreciate every single person, whether if there's someone that's vital or someone I see once a year. I win. It's like I live such a meaningful life. Like, I'm so grateful. Like, I'm lucky. Like, I truly wake up and feel like the luckiest person on earth. And I think maybe it's not as much of like finding that missing piece as much as it is to opening your eyes to the piece that's already there.
And that's deep, and a lot of that is really deep questions too for people to ask themselves. And if you just ask yourself, whether it's your family or work, what's the one person you roll your eyes at? You're gonna think of a person. Like
Yeah. Oh yeah.
there's always gonna be a person,
I have like
and
28. No, I'm just kidding.
and it's like it goes back to the concept we're social creatures at the end of the day. You need community, you need connection. That's the whole basis of part of the reason I started this was to enhance my connections with people. I felt so disconnected from people because you introduce society pressures and internet and social media, and you just lose contact with people as you get older. On top of that, that's just part of life anyways. um but it's getting back to the fact that, like, people don't like to say others don't define them. Well, in some way, they do. They
They
help
do.
construct who you are. You can decide if if they're right or not.
Mhm.
That's what you get to decide. But the fact that they have opinions, you don't get to decide their opinions. They might tell you them, they might not. So you have the ability to allow if those opinions are gonna influence you or not. It's really up to you at the end of the day. But to say that their opinions don't matter isn't true. Like, because on some level, yeah, it isn't because you decide, but they can influence you. And
Mhm.
to say that I've never been influenced by others' opinions is not true. Like, I have,
Right.
whether it's like my own life or anything. Like, there's a bunch of different examples I could give where you get influenced by others, but it goes back to caring about your community, caring about the connections, caring about those 40 to 50 people you might see on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that really influence who you are as a person, and even the person you roll your eyes at,
Right.
caring about them too, because they help dictate what's happening and where you're going in this life. And I think that's really valuable. I know we're getting towards like the end,
We
but I
are.
kind of wanted you to go a little bit on of like the journey of entering your profession and how it's like really benefited you. I don't know how recently you started doing the work
Mhm.
with the children, but how it's been versus maybe what you thought it was going to be like.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna take your question. I'm gonna answer it, but I am gonna go like kind of around it a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah,
But I
dude.
promise I'm gonna answer it. So, um, going back to what we just talked about, right? Like, I'm gonna tell you a story. It's really silly. I went to Supercuts and I didn't have a lot of time, and I should have went to where I usually go. But I was like, no, I'm gonna go to Supercuts. I'm sure they'll do a good job. I go in, they kinda rush me a little bit, and from the front, they're like, "You think, like, this looks good? You're cool with it?" I'm like, "Yeah." I was like, yeah, looks great." Go ahead, I pay for it, I leave, and I go to work, and a coworker immediately walks up to me, and they go, "Oh my god, what happened to the back of your head?" I was like, "I I I got a haircut." And they're like, "Yo, they did." They're like, "I'm sorry, like, for, like, scaring you, but, like, they did you dirty." So, everyone that can, like, kinda see, they did me dirty. Um, I've had multiple people at this point, they're like, "Yo, you, like, your cut's awful." I'm like, but this is the point of like, wow, like how much attention this awful like hairdresser brought me. Like, of like it sounds like she's not awful, but the haircut is. So to be like, wow, like this person who like seemingly caused me like a problem, like it's not a problem, but like a problem, it's like cause other people to like comment, right? Take time out of their life to mention it and cause conversation. And like I take it really well. So like I joke with them and talk about how like silly it is. Um Getting to there, it's like to answer your question is like alter your thinking. If I thought I couldn't be a therapist, I can't be. When I started for a year. And I was like, I can't do this. I would go to kids' houses and I was like playing, I was like, hi. Like, I felt really weird about it. I didn't know like what I was doing. One day, I like was like, what if I just pretend to be a therapist instead of trying to be this textbook? And the day that clicked, I was like, I got this. Confidence is key. I start walking in confident, saying things confident. Sometimes I'd say something and leave and be like, I don't know if I should have said that. But it's the idea of like the confidence helped drive me. What helped me become a therapist is I had goals and I wanted to see them through. Maybe it's not the way I wanted it to, but I did. And this is where I bring in the second story. Growing up, I wanted to make money playing video games. Now, we grew up in the Twitch generation, YouTube generation, the PewDiePies, Mr. Beasts, like all these people that are like super viral from playing video games. And I was like, I want to be just like that. Twitch stream. I tried it. It's exhausting. To play a character for an hour, like, what's up, guys? We're gonna have. I was like, I cannot do this. But I also know, like, personally, like, I'm not interesting enough to, like, just be playing. Like, I'm not a good, like, at gameplay. So, like, I've played video games more than most people, and I get schooled. Like, I've played Call of Duties, like, every single year for, like, 12 years, and I will get cooked by, like, a 4th grader. Like, it's unbelievable. Like, really, but it's the truth. And my friends clown me for it. They're like, "You're garbage at video games." I'm like, "Yes, but I probably know more about video games and have played more than you." So for me, I was able to take that and incorporate that to my job. And I can like honestly say I'm probably one of the only people in Rhode Island that does video game therapy. And I'm not talking about addiction video game addiction therapy. I'm talking about video game therapy, where I take a group of kids or a one-on-one, and we have a lesson of trust. And we'll play Super Mario, where one child is facing the screen and one isn't. The one isn't has the controller. They have to trust their partner that they're going to tell them when to jump and when to walk right and when to walk left. I get paid every day to play video games. No, I'm not a Twitch streamer. Getting back to your question, like why and how I got into it is I took what made me happy and what I appreciate and what I believe, use the evidence-based practices that we know the work, and try my best to use those to enhance and improve other people's lives based on what they're coming in trying to better. I'm not trying to fix you. I don't believe in that. But if you come in and there is something you want to work on, I will be that support to try to help you get there. And I think there's so much more that we could go on for. And maybe this will be like a part 4 eventually where I can tell you, like, after, because I've only been doing it for a year or so. So after like 10 years of doing it, or 5, we can get more into it. But to answer your question simply of why I got into therapy, it's because I wanted to help others. I told you last podcast, I wanted to be the Lou Propatier to me, to some other people. And I don't necessarily have to be Lou to them, but I kind of figured out I have to be Zane. I have to be the Zane Propatier in my life to be there for other people. That's when it clicked. I got to be me. I don't have to be Lou. I don't have to be these people that, they mean a lot to me, and they have adapted me, the good, the bad, like the ugly, how we talked about. But it's like I have to be the me so that I can try to help others the way that I see fit. And I think that's probably how I'm going to wrap this up.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect place to tie it up. And I love to hear that you're taking a modern approach in your therapy practices, something that really was valued for you, and taking kind of clinical stuff and building the trust of the kids and working it and making it fun too. Cause I
Yeah.
can imagine they fucking love that shit. Like,
Oh, it's a
and it's probably
blast.
so funny to watch because like they probably hit a turtle or die or something
Yeah.
like that, and like they get all frustrated and laugh, and but it also it's just a different approach, and I would love to hear how that's going to play out in the future, and how it's helping people, and how excited people are to try something like that. 'Cause I've never heard of something like that, and I mean, obviously I'm not a child either, but like
Right.
I
Yeah.
think that's going to be an interesting take to see how that goes long in the future, and like maybe that's something that you could really apply to what you're doing, is like the modern takes of stuff. You're a fresh person in a fresh space, and you get to bring your ideas with the clinical practice and
Right.
studies behind that. And I think it'll be really interesting to hear where you go from here, and adding years on to your experience. And I think that'll add to the conversations that we have in the future. But I think that is a really great place to start wrapping this up. And I really appreciate you for coming on the podcast and always
you.
being willing to share details about your life and to
I
go into
appreciate
stuff.
you.
I appreciate that, because I don't always get that either. Like, not everyone
And the people
gives
that are
that.
watching or listening, I appreciate you.
I think that's a wonderful thing, because not everyone is so appreciative to
Yeah.
not only just the interviewer, to the people that listen. It's like, you guys are the reason that this also exists. Like,
Mhm.
it's obviously a huge part on my guests, such as yourself, to be willing to sit in a chair across from me and have a conversation. But it's also valuable that people listen too.
Right.
Because if you don't have an audience, I mean, you're really just screaming into the void. And
Right.
what
Yeah.
is there value in that? I don't know. It's a whole different podcast. But
That's for sure.
Zane, I do appreciate you. I don't really have any last questions for you. I don't know if you want to say anything or plug anything or wrap anything up, but I'll give you a chance if you have anything. But other than that, I think we've touched on a bunch of stuff, and there's a bunch of great clips in here that I'm stoked with. So like, I don't really have a
Yeah.
last question to wrap with you. It's just if you have anything more to add or things to wrap things up with.
Yeah. I think I said everything that at least 24, very soon turning 25-year-old me has to say. If anything, starting at 21 on this podcast and being able to have that timepiece of who I was at 21, who I was at like 22 turning 23, and now who I am at 24 turning 25, it's like, wow, like how different things can be. Like if you don't believe things can change, just take me. If you don't believe you can be someone more, take me. And if you don't want to take me, then take yourself because you can do it.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you for taking the opportunity at something like that, because I would say to people, this is a screenshot of time. It's up to you if you want to use it. I mean, if
Right.
anyone wants to be a guest, there's plenty of opportunity to share your story and document your life in this format. And I take that with full responsibilities. I'm helping people document their life in some form or fashion and screenshotting time.
Absolutely.
But again, appreciate you, appreciate the audience. And if you guys like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your family, share with your grandma. Check it out, thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search The Carroll Connection, or at Jared M. Carroll, and it should pop up for you. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram, at Jared M. Carroll, at The Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. Till next time, guys. Peace.